Warhammer 40k Necron Tactics, the Canoptek Wraiths. Let's delve in a little bit deeper.
Necrons!
Nick speaking, and welcome to this video. Right, time for some more advanced Necron tactics for you, and in this one we're going to have a look at the Canoptek Wraiths. Before that though, if you love Necrons and you would like to keep up to date with the wonders of Warhammer 40k, then please give me a sub and hit the bell button so you don't miss an upload. Okay, so the Necron Wraiths. This is a unit that I've been playing for many years and I've had a lot of fun with it. I've seen it change in its unit type and how it performs on the table quite a lot. However, what we're really concerned with is how it performs in 8th edition. So let's go table down and take a look at the unit and how we're going to use it. Okay, so the Canoptek Wraiths, one of our fast attack choices, a unit which has always been very good for Necrons. Now this unit moves 12 inches, which is really fast for Necrons at the moment. They have a weapon skill and a ballistic skill of 3+, their strength 6 and toughness 5. They have 3 attacks and they have 3 wounds, with their leadership 10 and a 4+ save in their main stats. However, the key thing about these is they have a 3+ invulnerable save as well. Now it's this 3+ invulnerable save for the Necron Wraiths that really make them quite a precious unit for Necrons, because we don't have many units with invulnerable saves. And it's this invulnerable save which really makes the unit work totally different from most of the other units in the army. Now coming in at 38 points a model and in unit sizes of 3 to 6, these guys do have a few options available to them. You could take a particle caster, a transdimensional beamer or whip coils. Now unless you're playing power level, you're only really going to be taking the particle caster on these guys. That is basically a pistol, which means that in close combat, in your turn, you can shoot it. So basically it's like having an extra attack in your battle round, which is very nice to have. Now the last thing that they have, which again really sets them apart from other units in the army, is their Wraith form. Now this is the ability that actually gives them their 3+ invulnerable save, but not only that, it also means that when they move, they can ignore terrain and other models. Now this is very handy. You can jump over other models and you can jump over pieces of terrain which other models aren't able to do so. So I think you can already tell I'm a big fan of this particular unit. So let's find out now how we're going to use them on the table. Okay, so the first thing to note with the Wraiths, with their 3+ invulnerable save, of course, they don't need to deploy in cover. This makes your army deployment that much easier. It means that if you have limited amount of cover, you can reserve that cover for your warriors, for your immortals, for all of those units that need to be in cover. The Wraiths don't need to be in cover. So if you have a couple of units of Wraiths in your army, it tends to make deployment a lot easier. It also means, of course, as you charge forward, you don't have to worry about looking for the next piece of cover to get your Wraiths into. That means that your Wraiths are a free model on the table. They're free to move wherever they like. Really handy. Not only that, but you can hide them behind a building or a piece of terrain which another unit may struggle to move around. These guys can just move through it to the other side of the building with no trouble at all. So they're very free moving on the table, and that is very powerful. Now when it comes to unit size, it of course depends on the situation. In a lower points game where you can only maybe afford 3 Wraiths, they can work really well because they're fast, they're durable, and when they get into close combat, their Vicious Claws is -1 AP. Now they're not amazing in close combat, but they can pack a punch under the right circumstances. So in those smaller point games, 3 works really well. In actual fact, 3 can work very well even in bigger points games. However, personally, I prefer to put more Wraiths on the table if I can. Now going up to bigger point games, of course it does make sense to use bigger units. It doesn't mean that a unit of 3 Wraiths can't work in a 2000 point game. It just means they're not going to be quite as survivable, because of course your opponent is going to have more firepower on the table. So making your Wraith unit bigger, of course, makes it more survivable, and also it makes it more threatening. Now the other option is to actually split this unit down into two. So you could actually have 2 units of 3, although I don't think I personally would go that route. If I only had the points for 6 Wraiths, I would take them in 1 unit. However, if I did have the points to add a couple of more Wraiths, maybe 1 here and 1 here, I would then be quite happy to have 2 units of 4 on the table. Now the advantages of having 2 units over 1 unit is quite dramatic. It means that you're going to be able to cover a much wider area of the table. These 2 units can still work together. You can keep them maybe 6 inches apart and forward charge with both units at the same time. They can intercept 1 unit if they need to, as if they were a big unit, or they can split off and they can do their own thing. It also means that you have the option to take 2 objectives in the middle of the table, as opposed to just 1 if you had a single unit. Now of course you could add more models to each unit, or indeed you could work towards taking a 3rd unit as well. Remember, 1 unit is none, 2 units is 1, and 3 units is some. In other words, if you only have 1 unit on the table and that gets destroyed, you've got nothing left. If you have 2 units on the table and 1 gets destroyed, you've still got 1 unit left. And 3 means you've got a lot of versatility in the units. Now of course it is a points investment to have that many Wraiths on the table, and unless you're playing quite a themed list, you're probably only going to have a maximum of 2 units of Wraiths. But that's okay, because 2 units is very workable on the table. So let's have a look how we're going to work these guys. Okay, so let's assume you've got Wraiths in your army. You have 2 ways of using the unit. The first way is defensively. You might be able to deploy them behind a piece of terrain, out of your opponent's line of sight. I know you have your 3+ invulnerable save, but I think everyone knows who has a 3+ save, you can quite easily roll 1s and 2s. And although they have 3 wounds, they are quite vulnerable to things like mortal wounds and wounds that do multiple damage. Also some psychic powers as well. So if you're using them in a defensive role, if you can hide them behind a piece of terrain somewhere near where one of your objectives are, that maybe your immortals or your warriors are sitting on, these can make quite a good counter assault unit. As soon as your enemy gets close, these guys can move 12 inches right through the building if they need to the other side of the building, and then they can counter assault the unit that's coming in. These guys are great defensively as well as attacking. And when it comes to attacking, my advice with these guys is to be ultra aggressive. What you want to be doing turn 1 is pushing them up as quickly and as fast as you can. So move them the full 12 inches. And if you have 2 units, especially if you have 2 big units of Wraiths, pushing them up forward like that, that is scary for your opponent. Your opponent will know that those are toughness 5, those have 3 wounds, those have -1 AP in the assault, and those have a 3+ invulnerable save. Oh my god, I need to kill them. And that is exactly what you want your opponent to try and do. Because when you're playing Wraiths, you need to have the mindset that these Wraiths, although they're quite expensive, 42 points with the Particle Caster, these Wraiths will die during the game. They won't survive the whole of the game. If they do, then lucky you. But if you go with the mindset, so they're probably going to die turn 1 or turn 2, maybe turn 3 if you're lucky. But the primary thing with the Wraiths is massive distraction to your enemy, and with the ability to take those midfield objectives early in the game for those Maelstrom missions. You can, of course, if you want to, just sit them on objective. 3+ invulnerable save. I can sit an objective in the open. Wow, great. But of course, if you can get them into the assault, that is even better. So now we know we're going to be aggressive with the Wraiths, and the reason for that is your enemy generally will shoot the nearest target. Anything that's coming close to them that has speed, that's what they shoot at. So now we're taking control of the table. We are dictating what our enemy is going to do. We have the power on the table. Now of course, 1 unit of Wraiths probably isn't going to do that. Your enemy is still going to take care of them, they're still going to shoot at them. but more than one unit of Wraiths, that is going to be a problem for your enemy. And the reason why we have more than one unit is if your enemy is able to kill one unit in a turn, you've still got another unit there. It's more difficult to focus down 2 or 3 units of something than it is of one. Now we can amplify this problem for your enemy quite easily. Okay, so we've moved our Wraiths, and at the end of the movement phase, bang! We deep strike in some flayed ones. This is a great distraction unit, another nice assault unit. Plenty of attacks and quite survivable, especially in a piece of terrain. However, flayed ones are quite expensive at the moment at 210 points. They do work well with Wraiths, but only if you have the points level. If you don't have the points level available, the alternative is some Scarab Swarms. Now we talked about Scarab Swarms in the previous video, but charging Scarab Swarms forward with Wraiths is a great combination. A cheap unit and an expensive unit. It gives your opponent some choices. Do they take out the unit they know they can kill, or do they try and kill the unit which is the powerful unit but the most survivable and difficult to kill? It makes good choices, and it means you've got an extra assault unit in there without too much point investment. Okay, so let's assume we've made it across the table. We've taken a casualty here and there as we've gone across. Now remember, you can use a stratagem from the chapter approved which gives you RP on your Canoptek Wraiths. It's pretty decent. It is 2 command points, but if you have a big unit of Wraiths and you take heavy damages, 2 command points, you roll any dice for the ones that have died, and on a 5+ they come back up. That's a 42 point unit coming back up with all its wounds, all 3 wounds, for 2 command points. I wouldn't spend those command points willy-nilly on just trying to get one Wraith up. I'd only use it if you've taken heavy casualties, but it is an option open to you. So we've made it across the table, we're ready to assault. But what unit do we assault with the Wraiths? Well, once again, you need to have a good mindset with the Wraiths. Just like we have the mindsets that we're probably going to lose our Wraiths quite quickly, we need to have the mindsets that our Wraiths aren't going to do too much in close combat either. They will kill things, but they're not close combat beasts. However, they are great at holding things up in close combat. They're great at attacking something which doesn't have the fly special rule to stop them from shooting. In actual fact, I would say that the Wraiths not being amazing in close combat is an advantage, because you can then have the mindset these Wraiths can assault anything. They can assault squishy units, they can assault tanks and monstrous creatures, and they can assault hard-hitting units. Of course, they will go down quicker if you're assaulting hard-hitting units that can do multiple damage. However, they can cope with all of the units on the table. And that is the great thing about Wraiths. They're very, very versatile. Not only that, they're a great solo unit on the table. They don't have to be amongst the rest of the phalanx. They can go out and do their thing. They don't need to be next to a cryptic to get RP or anything like that. They're very independent, and that is why I love Wraiths and the Necron army. So as you can tell, I am a big fan of the Wraiths. Now I don't think they're necessarily an auto-include to a Necron force, but I think they definitely do have a good place in our armies, and they offer something different from the rest of the phalanx, and that has to be a good thing. So if you don't have Wraiths yet in your army, I think it's definitely worth having a look at getting a unit or 2. Beam me up!